This is India, a story in the making, and I'm your host, Lavina Tandon. Hello and welcome to India, a story in the making. As the biggest democratic exercise of the world, the Indian elections are coming to an end. United Kingdom, Britain has announced its own elections. Britain, known as the land of mother of democracy, now is in its election fervor. Now, elections change the government, sometimes at least, but how do they impact the working of the countries or the trades between the country? That is quite impacted as well. In the light of this, free trade agreement between India and UK that has been hanging for a very long time, how will that be impacted, or will it be at all? And why has it not been through the line despite being spoken about for a very long time? These are many questions that we explore with Baroness Foster, who now takes the position of chair of Inter-UK Trade. But there is something more to her as well. Very interesting. She was the first female to be the first minister of Northern Ireland. And I want to explore with her, what is it to be a woman in politics in the United Kingdom, and also the first minister at that, and what can women bring to politics that men cannot? So an interesting discussion indeed. Stay tuned on India, a story in the making. This is Baroness Foster. Hello and welcome to India, a story in the making. Usually I do this in person, but Baroness Arlene Foster, who is with me and joining from Northern Ireland, just left and the elections were announced, so I had to get her somehow. So here we are doing it virtually. Thank you very much, Baroness Foster, for making time despite the elections having been called in the UK. And thank you very, very much indeed. Today,
well, it's lovely to see you again, Lavina. And actually, it must be about a year and a half since we had a chat, so it's good to catch up again.
Yeah, indeed, absolutely. And what a amazing time. The mother of the biggest democratic exercise in India is coming to an end, and the mother of democracy has announced its election. So should I just begin by asking you about India? You have been to India, you know India, you are in the thick of the trade, Indo-UK relations, and we'll get into that. But tell me, how do you look at these elections, the biggest democratic exercise, 969 million people having to vote, and a polling booth for one person being 10 people, a team of 10 taking a polling booth for one person? How do you see this whole election from sitting here?
Well, isn't that wonderful to hear that story, that people are actually coming together just to allow one person to vote? Because democracy is about the power of one. It's about individuals expressing their opinion as to what they want to see. And the scale of what is happening in India is just very difficult for us in the UK to understand, because it's such a huge exercise in democracy. And now that the election has been called here as well, obviously our minds turn to what is going to happen here in the UK. But I suppose the biggest impact that the calling of the election here in the UK has had as regards India is the fact that there was to be a British delegation go out to New Delhi this week to try and sort out the last remaining knotty problems in the trade deal. And of course, because of our rules here in the UK, pre-election rules, that visit's now not going to take place, and that's disappointing. Of course, disappointing, I'm sure, for both sides who have been working hard to try and bring this to a conclusion. But the prize is still there, and I think once the elections are over and we have a new government in place, that should certainly be one of the priorities for the next government.
And I think you are the chairperson for Intertrade UK, and FTA, the free trade agreement between India and the UK, has been going on forever. We have been listening about it since Boris Johnson was there. Do elections in any shape or form change the way or what government comes in each place? Does that change the dynamics of FTA in any way?
Well, I hope it doesn't. I hope it's a continuation. I mean, the officials, the civil servants will remain the same, but obviously they will have different ministers in charge. It will be interesting to see if there's any slight nuances and changes in what's important for those ministers. Obviously, if it goes against all the polls and it's a Tory government again, then it will definitely be a continuation. But I think most people expect to have a Labour government here in the UK after the 4th of July. And, you know, this is the biggest deal that we will do after Brexit. And therefore, we really need to concentrate on that. The scale of the deal that has been talked about, I think, is really important. And therefore, I hope that the next government, whatever shade or colour it is, will prioritise, certainly in the Trade Department, the trade deal with India.
What about the Indian counterpart? Does that change the dynamics as to who comes, or who would one want or desire, if there is any?
Well, I think from what I understand, we expect a BJP government again in India, and if that is the case, then there'll be a continuation of the issues that we've been dealing with up until now. I mean, India and ourselves have got a long relationship, sometimes good, sometimes not so good. But I think at the moment we are in a really good place in relationships between India and ourselves. India invests a lot in the UK. I think it's the second largest investor in the UK. We, of course, likewise invest in India, and there's this really good relationship that goes on between India and the UK. And of course, in the person of our Prime Minister, it's been wonderful to see a British Indian Prime Minister come to the fore in the way that he has. And I think that underlies the relationship between India and the UK.
How significant, let us say, is this FTA agreement in terms of India, from when it started to where India is now? It has moved leaps and bounds. Indian market is quite lucrative. It is seen as the next big thing happening, or it's already in the making. Where does the FTA stand vis-a-vis that? What are the significant things that will move?
Well, I think it's a very good point, because when I started to go to India as a trade minister here in Northern Ireland back in about, I suppose, 2010, 2011, probably was my first visit to India. And of course, then it was a huge market for us, a small region of the United Kingdom, and we started to try and work with different regions of India. But even since then, the growth and the change in terms of technology that has been occurring in India, I think, has been really striking. And I was reading somewhere that whereas the 19th century was the UK's century and the USA's century was the 20th century, the 21st century is absolutely India's century. And because of its scale and because of its technology driving ahead, I think that that's probably right. And therefore, its leadership in terms of the global south is really, really important to the world. So it is this global superpower that we really need to harness. And I think for us in the UK, if we want to be global Britain, as we describe ourselves, then doing a deal with India is really, really important for us. And as I say, I hope it is a priority for the next government, whatever shade that is.
In the time that we are talking, Britain has had Brexit and has become smaller in the sense of a market, and India has grown. Do you think this FTA is quite important for Britain to have struck in terms of where it is now? And it is, in a way, redefining and rediscovering itself and making its place.
Yeah. I think there has been a shift, certainly, and not enough of a shift, if I'm honest, Lavina, from my perspective. When we left the European Union, the idea was that we as an independent nation would be able to do deals with other countries across the world. And there have been some moves in that respect. The CC, the Southern trade deal that we recently did with the Pacific nations, I think has been important. But I also think that we could do more. and it has been disappointing that we haven't been able to get the trade deal over the line with India. It has taken, and I know it's very complicated, and I know there's a lot of little parts that cause problems, and that's what usually holds up deals. It's not the whole, you could be 85% of the way there, but the 15% that is left is really problematical. So the question is, do you agree the 85% that you have and then put the other 15% to the side? That may or may not be acceptable to India. And if it isn't, then you have to try and strive to deal with the other difficulties that are there. So I think Brexit has given the UK an opportunity to do this. I hope we can move that on ahead now with the next government and don't get bogged down in the ever increasing circles of should we go back into Europe again? Because I don't think that's what the UK people are. I think we want to just get on, talk about global Britain and do the deals with places like India, which are forging ahead in the world. And it would be wonderful to be a part of that.
Would you reveal some of the niggly bits? I mean, what are the niggly bits, really?
Well,
as you can.
I mean, I think people have been talking about when I say niggly bits, they are quite big. So obviously work visas are an issue. And I think recognition of professional standards across India and the UK are important too. But I don't think these are insurmountable. It's a bit like when we're talking to the United States of America as a global piece as well. There are difficulties sometimes there because different states have different levels of regulation and what have you. And sometimes it's easier to do deals with different states. Like there is a cooperation understanding with Texas, for example. But it would be really good if we could move ahead with India. I think given our history, given our common understanding, our value system, which I really strongly believe that we share, I think there is an opportunity to do a deal that would make a difference to us, yes, in the UK, but also in India as well. And I think that's what's important, that we both benefit from it.
I know these deals are so much dependent on the civil servants more than the politicians. The politicians have the intent. Do you think somewhere India having shifted its the way it is in the world, the space that it takes in the world, the stature that it has, and Britain or the people working around it have not really readjusted their minds to it and find it hard to see India in a position where it is now that holds them back to finalize or formalize the deal. Has this culture in play at all?
It's a very interesting point, actually. Sometimes I get frustrated with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and indeed with some of our civil servants that they haven't, they're sort of playing the game with the rules and the tools to deal with it from the 90s or from the 2000s, and
Exactly.
Things change. And I think there has to be an acknowledgement of how India has changed quite rapidly over quite a short period of time, particularly in terms of opening up and scaling back on regulation. Doesn't mean that there isn't still issues that we need to talk about and how we understand each other in terms of culture and what have you. But I think our values are very much shared. And therefore, I think it is a good point. And I hope that whoever the politicians are who are leading on this in the future can bring some of that to the civil servants as well. I mean, I'm not dismissing civil servants don't understand. That would be the wrong thing to say. But I do think you need to understand that anything that you do has to be flexible. So if we are to have a trade deal, it has to be able to move and it has to be able to flex and not just be set in stone at the moment it's signed. And to be able to do that requires good negotiation skills, I think.
Yeah, I know, and talking to each other rather than talking at each other. I think that's sometimes I hear that kind of talking at India, which is you have to look across at each other as equal partners.
Most definitely. When you see what has been happening in India, there is no doubt about that. I mean, I think the days of the UK talking at people should be gone, should not be in anybody's psyche, anymore. And I think what we should be doing is trying to find a relationship space, a trade deal that respects each other, respects each other's strengths, and also where there are challenges and weaknesses, and how we can get around those. But if there is that genuine respect for each other, and we're not talking at each other, but we're actually talking with each other, and trying to find a deal that is good for both countries, not just for one or the other. What sometimes I get frustrated, Lavina, maybe it's the female politician in me as opposed to me, this is not about just getting a win for one side. It's about actually getting a win for both sides so that we can both benefit.
Indeed.
I really think that.
Yes, thank you. And you've been so open and upfront about it. Thank you for that, really. We need more people like you in there. Baroness Foster, you said you went to India in 2010 and then you went in 2016. Do you yourself also feel that it's moved, or because I go like you, like any other person now? What is the change that you feel that needs to be taken note of?
Well, I feel that it has changed and has become more open in terms of business, in terms of doing business. I haven't been back since I think it was 2016. I had been a couple of times before that to Bangalore. I'd been to New Delhi. I'd been to Mumbai. And I mean, the thing when you visit India, it's just lovely to think about. Actually, it's an assault on all your senses. I just love it. You go and it's just, oh my goodness, this is wonderful. And the noise and the smells and the color and the culture, it's a wonderful place to visit. And I do hope to be back in the near future if I can at all.
What do you love?
Well, when I was going there, it was mostly about meeting businesses that were interested in coming to Northern Ireland, or maybe we had some businesses with us from Northern Ireland wanting to do trade in India. So it was very much centered around that. But I did have a bit of an opportunity to get out and about around Mumbai. And at the time I was in Bangalore, actually, they were building the new rail system in the city. And it was just wonderful to see the speed and the expertise and building infrastructure that was going on at that time. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to going back to India if I can.
Yeah, you would have gone had the elections not been called.
Hopefully, yeah. But look, I mean, as you know, elections are taking place in so many places this year. I think it's dubbed the year of elections because I think about half the community of the world are going to elections, which is good because it is good that people, everybody has the same power on election day. I have the same power as you because we only have one vote each, and therefore, doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter what your standing is in society, you have the same power as the person next to you in the polling booth. And to me, that's the wonderful thing about democracy. We have one vote, we use it. And I get frustrated when I hear people say, no, I'm not voting. I go,
I agree. I totally agree.
I might not agree with your politics, but you should vote, because if you don't vote, then your voice isn't heard. And I think that's really frustrating.
Yeah, you have to speak, whatever it is. That's absolutely right. Moving to the UK elections now, we have these few weeks to get it all set and done. How are you playing it out? What's happening, do you think? Some insider news.
well, it's certainly shorter than the Indian elections. That.
Indeed.
But I mean, I was in Westminster when the Prime Minister called elections last Wednesday. It was a shock. It was genuinely a shock, particularly for people in the Conservative Party. So on the Wednesday morning, the buzz started that something was happening. I actually thought there was going to be a reshuffle of his ministers. I went in actually to Prime Minister's question time because I thought, I have a bit of time. I'm going to go in and see what's been said here. And he said in response to the SNP leader's question about the timing of the elections, it will be in the second half of this year. And I don't think anybody expected that to be July, So it has been a shock for a lot of people, and you've seen the number of people that have decided they're not running for election. The biggest, I think, ever. It's a record in the Tory party and the Conservative Party in particular. A huge number of people deciding not to run again, which leaves a real problem because constituency associations have to find candidates within a very, very short period of time. They don't have time to vet them. They don't have time to get to know their new candidates. And then they're supposed to go out and canvass for them and ask people for their votes. So it's a difficult time for a lot of individual politicians in terms of the macro picture, the bigger picture. I think most people, most commentators polling are saying that it's going to be a Labour government that we will have after July the 4th. I think the big question is not will we have a Labour government, but how big will the majority be? And I think that's a really interesting question, because Labour has to win big in Scotland if they're going to have any sort of a workable majority. And I think the way things are looking at the moment, they will probably get that.
Yeah, it looks like that. It looks like that indeed. But I'll go to another question. But before that, was there another? Why would he call it in July? I mean, in June or now? Was there something brewing, or there was too many factions within the party, and he just and he didn't think that the economy is going to go any further than the inflation coming to normal?
Yeah, I think that inflation coming down as low as it did was the trigger for him.
Yeah.
I think he felt because inflation's at this level now, I'm going to go to the country. I certainly thought he was going to wait to November. I thought that he would wait to that time because then maybe the issue around immigration, illegal immigration, would have settled. There would have been flights out to Rwanda, and things would have moved on. But he obviously thought, you know what, I'm taking such a battering. Is it better to go now? You know, it's going to get worse if I keep staying in office for this time. And so it was a balancing act for him. And I think he just came down on the side of, right, I'm going to go now in the summer. It's easier for candidates to be out in the summer. There's no doubt about that. A November election, and I fought a November election, can be miserable because you're going to people's doors in sleet and hail. They don't want to open the doors. They don't want to see you. And you're feeling miserable because you're out in the weather. So I think July, from the candidate's point of view of getting out and about, is probably better. But it was a shock. It was a shock.
Yeah, indeed, it was. Now, how do you think Labour government, if it does, which it looks like, coming at the helm, will change, if anything, the relationship, if at all, with India? Because it's not been in good waters late, especially with the diaspora, with the Jeremy Corbyn's Kashmir comment. So overall, what do you think?
Well, I think, as you know, there are many British Indians who support the Labour Party, and they will want to make their voices heard within the Labour Party. I think they will want to set out their stall, and I think the Shadow Chancellor is doing that today on the economy. They want to send out a message that they can be trusted with the economy, that they're not going to trash the economy. But they're playing a very interesting balancing act, because on the one hand you had Keir Starmer out yesterday talking about he was a socialist, he believed in socialism, and then today we have Rachel Reeves out talking about the economy and how the Labour Party is going to grow the economy. So it's a balancing act for them at the minute. They need to keep their core vote content, because, as you know, I mean, there's been a little bit of turbulence there over Gaza and Israel, and they've lost some of the Muslim vote has gone to independents instead. So that's something I think to watch in some of those seats where there is a significant minority there of Muslim voters. But I think that they will want to say to people, we are serious about the economy. And therefore, I am hopeful that they will pick up the trade deal again. It would be a disaster if they didn't do that. I think it would send out a very bad message if they didn't pick that up after the election.
Yeah, I'm sure they would, and because Britain needs it. In fairness, it does need it. coming to you, Baroness, you've been the First Minister of Northern
Yeah.
Ireland twice, am I right?
Yes.
Twice,
Twice. That's right. Yes.
twice, right?
Twice in 2016, and then during that awful period of COVID in 2020, 2021, which is difficult to think back on, actually. It's almost like a nasty dream that we all had
Yeah.
back in 2020, 2021. But yes, that's the time I was First Minister. Yeah.
Sometimes I can't believe when I go out that there was not a soul on the road.
I know.
We
I
seem to
know.
have gone
It
over.
was a very, very strange time. I live off the main Belfast road in Northern Ireland, and cars up and down it all the time. And I could stand on that road in the middle of the road for minutes without a car coming during that first lockdown, which of course
Yeah,
was the most intense period when everybody was really afraid.
sure.
And it was a horrendous time.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
But you sailed through it, and you're the only woman who has been in Northern Ireland as the First Minister. What is it like to be um, a woman in politics and completely leading it from the front?
Yeah. So I was the first female First Minister, but now there's a first and deputy First Minister female in Northern Ireland now as well. So pleased about that and see that continuing. I consider myself to be probably in the transition generation, transitioning from all male politicians. And I was looking at a photograph of the opening of a road in the 1970s just yesterday, and all of the people in the photograph were men. Not one single woman was in that photograph. And now I'm pleased to say that there are a number of very high profile women in Northern Ireland politics, and there's more young women coming forward as well. So that's really good to see. And I think that's been a change in society here. And you see it across the UK. You see more women coming to the fore, which is really good. But I mean, in my lifetime, when I was growing up in the 70s, men were the politicians. And as I say, for me to get involved in politics and to become the First Minister of Northern Ireland was quite something. And I'll always be incredibly proud of the fact that I was the first female to hold that job. And it was a wonderful privilege to do it as well.
I saw your Twitter, Baroness Foster, and you have the first thing you have, mother of three.
Yeah.
And you did this all the way through. I mean, seriously, and if I was to describe myself, the first thing that comes in my mind is mother. How was
Yeah.
it like being a mother and the first minister to the nation as well?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that, because my children have been such a blessing as they are. I mean, obviously we all have our moments, don't we, with our children, but they've been such a blessing because they really ground you in who you are, don't they? Because you're always going to be their mum. You're not always going to be the First Minister. You're not always going to be a politician. You're not always going to be whatever you're doing as a job at that particular point in time, but you're always going to be a mum.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important for me. Even when I was First Minister, my staff always knew that if my children rang and they needed me, I would take the call, regardless of who I was meeting at that time, because they
Has
are
it
the most
happened?
important
Please
people.
spill some beans. Has it happened where you were giving, let's say, a prime minister, president, and then your child rings?
I do remember my middle child, who's now 22. I was on a visit to South Africa, and we were moving about between meetings, and I get a call from George, and I said, "Oh my goodness, what's wrong?" And I answered the call, and the question was, "Where is my rugby kit, Mum? I can't find my rugby kit. Where is it?" And I go, "George, I'm in South Africa." It was funny, but I said, "Ask your father." But
And would the father know?
yeah, well, that's a good point. Probably not, but hopefully you would know where to look. So yeah, no, the kids have been wonderful. I think all women who work, all women who are high profile, have a part of them feels guilt, because they feel, am I not spending enough time with my children? Am I not? I'm away from them. But they've had such wonderful opportunities as a result of me being First Minister. They've met politicians from all over the place as young children, and I'm really thankful that they're three pretty sensible, pretty down to earth kids, and I'm really grateful for that.
So, when sometimes I've had to take my children for interviews, including when I interviewed David Cameron. Actually, my children were sitting outside on the side,
Yeah.
were very young. Do they recognize this, or they see this as, what I mean was, do they recognize this as an opportunity that they had to meet these politicians, or they just feel, oh, mom was just lugging us around
Yeah.
everywhere?
I think at the time they don't really realize, but now I know when they look back and look at photographs and my daughter with Boris Johnson, or just whatever, that they will realize as they get older that it was pretty significant. The mum brought me into a meeting and Nancy Pelosi was there and she said hi. And I mean things like that.
Now,
it
yes.
now when later on when they're growing up, but at the time they were probably going, I could be at home watching TV or on my
Yeah.
Xbox or whatever.
How has
Yeah.
it shaped them? Do you think they have shaped them differently in any way? And I'm just seeing hope because my children are still growing up and they've stopped going out with me now.
Yeah. No, I think it has. Obviously, you don't have that sliding door moment where mum wasn't a politician and she wasn't a first minister or whatever. But I'm really, we worked hard at, first of all, keeping them out of the public eye and having them a very normal childhood, apart from the times when they went with mum to different places. And I think that was important because they need to understand that mum's job is a job and they need to go to school and they need to have a life and play rugby and do all of the ordinary things. So my husband has been a wonderful support as well. And I think that's always important that your partner's there to help in these times.
So important indeed. What does a woman's energy bring to a post like the one that you were on, or Margaret Thatcher was? What does that energy to the world? Because often we hear that we need more feminine energy to bring this world together that is falling apart almost. Do you agree?
Well, I do think that we do multitasking better. I mean, there is no doubt about that. So one of yeah one of my favorite photographs of Margaret Thatcher is her in the kitchen cooking a meal for her two children, actually, when she's prime minister. So I mean, we do all the ordinary things, but we also do the things that we have to do at the same time. So, and I think that grounds you. I think it makes you realize, yes, you're holding down this powerful job, but you're also in touch with all of the things that everybody else has to do. So when people used to say to me, childcare is a real problem, I'd say, yeah, I know that because I have to balance and make sure that I have childcare in place if I'm late. My dear late mother-in-law, goodness, what would I have done without her, was always there for me, always lifted the kids if I was going to be late, or I had a circle of really strong friends who could step in as well. And I think because of that, women have to think ahead. What if I'm going to be late? What if X happens? So you're thinking ahead all of the time. And I think that is a good skill to have.
Oh, brilliant. So thinking ahead now, actually, we would have a section called High Five India, and I would be giving you a high five in the end, and that would be a reward. It's 5 rapid fire questions. I'll ask quickly because the time is running out. So are you ready?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. India for you in one word.
Color.
Okay. What is it about India that the world doesn't get?
I think they don't get how dynamic it is and how you can see photographs of India and that's what you think India is, but then you could see something that completely is different and that is also India. So India is such a breadth of experience, I think.
Okay. What is it that a woman politician brings to the table that a man cannot?
I think the multitasking piece, I think that is something that we bring to the table because we do it every day and we don't think about it. But then when it comes to politics, it becomes really useful tool when you're thinking about different things at different times.
Okay. If you could meet any historical figure, or take the place of any historical figure you can choose, who would it be and why?
I always say that Margaret Thatcher had a huge influence in my life because she became Prime Minister when I was just 8 years old. And she was there right throughout my teenage years, and therefore had an impact on me as a woman could be Prime Minister. But I never got to meet her. And I really regret that. And I would have loved to have met her and to just had a conversation with her.
If you wouldn't have been a politician, what would you be?
Well, I started life as a lawyer, so probably would have stayed at being a lawyer if I hadn't have been. I did want to be a police officer, but my father said no.
Oh, that was a wonderful high five.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Baroness Foster. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you every time it is when I speak to you. And thank you so very much for being on India, a story in the making.
Thank you. Look forward to speaking again.
Thank you. It's such a privilege to bring these conversations to you on India, a story in the making, a show that is consistently doing well and can do even better if you can like, follow and subscribe. The YouTube channel, Lavina Tandon Official, for the videos, and for podcasts, it is any platform that you get your podcast from, Apple, Spotify, Audible, wherever. Please do follow and subscribe. This helps us generate more such content for you. And I'm also there on social media. On Twitter and LinkedIn, I'm as Lavina Tandon. On Instagram, I'm there as Tandon Lavina or Lavina Tandon Official. So anything, please do follow and send your feedback. That is absolutely mine of gold for us. Thank you. Take care and God bless. Listen to my podcast audio on Apple, Spotify, BingePods, or wherever you get your podcast from. And watch the video of the podcast on my YouTube channel, Lavina Tandon. New episodes are out every Sunday.